is now unveiling a revamped strategy, as our deputy political editor Craig McCulloch reports.
The government's self-titled Kiwi Build Reset does away with all targets. Ms Wood says they were too ambitious and resulted in homes being built in the wrong places. The government will instead report monthly on its progress. Those houses that have yet to sell in Te Kaupata, Canterbury and Wanaka will be sold on the private market and the proceeds recycled into developments where there's more demand for first home buyers. From now on, buyers will require only a 5% deposit for a government-backed mortgage, and people will be able to group together their $10,000 first home grants. $400 million has been set aside from KiwiBuild's budget for progressive home ownership. Community housing providers will be able to apply for funds to run schemes like shared equity or rent to buy. From Parliament, Craig McCulloch.
State Highway 5 between Tirau and Nongataha west of Rotorua is likely to be closed for some time because of a serious bus crash. Emergency services are at the scene, but there is no confirmed information yet on any injuries. Light rain was forecast in the area, so it's likely the roads are wet. The Transport Agency says long detours via Tauranga and Tokoroa will be required. The police say the bus rolled and they're asking drivers to avoid the area. Britain is teetering on the brink of a snap election as the political turmoil over Brexit intensifies. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has suffered a heavy defeat in Parliament and says he will seek to trigger an early election. Conservative Party rebels joined opposition MPs to seize control of the House of Commons agenda so they can introduce legislation to prevent Britain leaving the European Union without a deal at the end of October. A former advisor to Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, Helen Thomas, says there's no guarantee the bill will pass when it comes before the House tomorrow.
In fact, we should expect to see more inflammatory rhetoric and potentially more and more votes and more arguments as we move through these next few weeks towards the Brexit day itself. But one thing is for sure, this is not yet all resolved.
Helen Thomas, the 21 Conservative MPs who oppose their own government, will now be expelled from the party. The man accused of indecently assaulting 4 teenagers at a Labour Party summer camp has pleaded guilty to 2 amended charges and will be sentenced later this year. The 21-year-old has been accused of touching the genitals of 2 men, kissing and licking a woman on her neck and face, and groping another woman's breast and bottom. On the 3rd day of his trial in the Auckland District Court this morning, he pleaded guilty to assaulting 2 men at the camp in Waihi last year. He was discharged on the charges relating to 1 man and the 2 women. A man accused of murdering his mother in West Auckland can now be named. Martin Marinovich, who was charged in February, is before the High Court in Auckland. The 27-year-old was arrested shortly after his 59-year-old mother died in the West Auckland suburb of Orotia. He pleaded not guilty to a charge of murder through his lawyer Shane Tate. A 2-week trial has been set down for next February.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, no, all good. Can I just push these back a little bit?
Yeah,
I just need to make some room for my notes.
I might just a little tad. Won't ruin any of them.
Righto. Is everyone... Sorry. Here we go. Is everyone good? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for coming along today. So what's going to happen now is I'll take about 10 minutes to make a statement outlining the changes I'm announcing and the reasons for them, and then I'm more than happy to take questions after that. At the end of June, the Prime Minister asked me to take over the housing portfolio and to reset the government's build program. New Zealand has a housing crisis. It's been decades in the making, and it's one of the biggest long-term challenges our country faces. Since taking office, we've made some good starts tackling it. We've banned foreign speculation from the market, stopped the State House sell-off, introduced rental standards to make life better for renters, helped hundreds of homeless people off the streets and into homes, built record levels of new state and public housing, and we're addressing the fundamentals of land supply, development capacity and infrastructure provision through our urban growth agenda and reforms to the Resource Management Act. We're also progressing work to boost off-site manufacturing, and we're exploring build-to-rent programs. New Zealanders are seeing the benefits of these reforms in greater numbers of new public houses, warmer, safer housing for renters, the highest number of housing consents since the 1970s, house price rises more in line with wage increases, and first home buyers making up the largest proportion of sales in over a decade. But there's been one component of our housing policy, Kiwi Build, that simply isn't working the way we wanted it to. So it has to change. It isn't delivering the numbers we need at the pace we wanted, and too many of the homes it has built have been in the wrong place at the wrong price points for the area. New Zealanders want their government to be honest with them when things aren't working and to try to put it right. That's what today is about. Since I became Minister, I've been working, meeting and listening extensively with home builders, community housing providers, banks, academics and other housing experts. And today I want to announce the results of that work, a reset of the Kiwi Build Affordable Home Program and new initiatives to help get New Zealanders into homes. I want to be clear though, there is no silver bullet when it comes to housing. The crisis has been years in the making and it won't be fixed overnight or with one simple remedy. But if we don't make a start now, it will never be solved. We will need to make a range of continuous changes to housing over many years to turn things around. The changes I am announcing today are one step in a long journey. Firstly, we will be dropping the target of 100,000 houses over 10 years. Instead, we will focus on building as many homes as we can, as fast as we can. The targets we've had were over-ambitious and more seriously have actually driven perverse outcomes. The pressure to meet targets led the program to build homes in areas that which weren't the first home buyer demand for those houses, and they haven't sold. Kiwi Build should be used as a lever, not as an outcome. It is a tool to get the right homes in the right place at the right place, not an end to itself. For that reason, we will be selling the houses on the open market in Te Kaupata, Canterbury and Wanaka that haven't sold and recycling the capital into the program so we can start new developments in places where there clearly is demand. We are clearing the decks of what hasn't worked. In future, once Kiwi Build buyers have had an opportunity to buy homes, up to 15% of homes who will be able to be on-sold to a wider cohort so the capital can be recycled efficiently. We're also making changes to how Kiwi Build works. We're lowering the amount of the government underwrite provided to developers, increasing the incentive to sell to Kiwi Build buyers. When they don't, they will get less. We will measure our progress and allow New Zealanders to hold us to account by releasing a new monthly housing dashboard showing all the key indicators of housing, from the number of new consents, the number of new public homes built, progress on homelessness, public housing places available, to the number of Kiwi Build homes sold, consented, built and in the pipeline. Every month this dashboard will be released and I'll front up and be judged on our progress. There will be months where we will make headway and there will be months when we don't. There will be other changes. We'll be removing the asset test for second chances. People who have had to sell their family home as a result of a divorce or a family breakup and have to start out again on their own. There will still be an income test applied. We'll also be offering support to people who need to move to a much more expensive area because of work. So if a teacher in Ashburton who has owned their first home needs to move to Auckland, where we need teachers but prices are much higher, they will be eligible for a Kiwi Build home. We've also reduced occupation requirements for studio and one-bedroom homes to 1 year. We've heard very clearly that for people starting out 3 years in a one-bedroom or a studio might not take account for changes in family circumstances or their career. So that's the technical supply side. But today I also want to announce further changes to our housing policy. For most of New Zealand's modern history, it's been accepted that there is a clear role for government in helping New Zealanders into opportunities for home ownership. In the past, low interest rate mortgages through state advances loans and capitalisation of the universal family benefit provided a strong pathway to home ownership for many New Zealanders. It's how many New Zealand families got into home ownership, including my own. In the 1990s, the assistance provided by the state fell away, and not coincidentally, New Zealand's rates of home ownership began a long-term decline. We need to turn that around. So today I'm announcing a range of new support measures to make it easier for New Zealanders to afford to buy their own homes. We'll be reducing the deposit amount needed to get a government-backed mortgage and deposit assistance to 5%. And changing policy settings so that groups of 2 or more people can get together and each use their up to $10,000 deposit assistance to buy their first home. These changes will particularly help multi-generational families who want to purchase a first home. But deposit assistance alone isn't enough to help people locked out of the market today. We need new and innovative ways to help people onto the housing ladder. Right now, there are emerging and successful programs that are helping New Zealanders do this, but they are very limited. The Housing Foundation, for example, has around 400 people in their program and has helped, over the last 10 years, has helped around 400 people into home ownership through a shared equity scheme. Community providers like the Housing Foundation have programs that help families buy a share of a house, thereby reducing the deposit needed to get a mortgage and their repayments. Over time, the family can buy further chunks of the mortgage until they are the only owner on the title. The program often features wraparound budget support to help families take on that mortgage. These programs make a real difference, but these providers are small in scale and the number of people that have been helped is very small. A government-backed program will support 1,000 more New Zealanders into home ownership. And that's why we're setting aside $400 million from the Kiwi Build appropriation for progressive home ownership products like shared equity to help a group of people into their own homes. By growing the number of New Zealanders who can access these innovative new approaches to home ownership, we can help people who would otherwise be locked out of the market. We'll work alongside those providers to design schemes backed by government funding that get Kiwis into homes and help them service the mortgage. We estimate between 2,500 to 4,000 more people will be able to access these new innovative ways of buying a home. This is about the government returning to its historic role of expanding opportunities to people to afford their own homes. As I said before, the housing crisis has taken years to get this bad, and there is no silver bullet. But the promises we campaigned on and have delivered on, things like banning foreign speculators, building record levels of public homes and reforming the RMA, are already making a difference. Kiwi Build hasn't worked like we wanted, and today we are changing it. I am determined that we will keep making changes to get New Zealanders into homes that they can call their own. Happy to take your questions.
No more 100,000 homes. That was the whole premise of this program. Can you even call it Kiwi Build?
Absolutely, we can call it Kiwi Build. The premise of the policy actually was about a commitment by a government to making sure that New Zealanders had access to opportunities for home ownership. That is exactly what we're reconfirming today in this reset. I think the name is one of the less material things that I've thought about over the last few weeks as I've been reviewing the policy.
How many homes have been sold in the open market?
How many homes have been sold in the open market? We've provided those details to you. There will be 211 houses in Wanaka, 175 in Te Whata, and 75 across Canterbury. And that money will be recycled back so that can be used to build Kiwi Build properties in areas where we know there is demand from Kiwi Build buyers.
So how should the public hold you to account if there's no target?
We will be publishing all our figures monthly. One of the things that became really apparent to me when I lifted up the hood and had a look at what was going on with Kiwi Build is actually the targets were providing some perverse outcomes, that it became about chasing the target rather than thinking carefully about what was the right house in the right place. It all became about quantity. It's how we got into the situation of buying large numbers of properties in Wanaka that haven't sold, large numbers of places in Canterbury. When a target is driving a policy, I think it's time to call time on that and actually settle into something that is actually about delivering on the policy, and that is getting homes for New Zealanders.
Back on those ones of Wanaka and Te Whata, is a government underwritten homes and they could go to speculators?
These are government underwritten homes. We haven't taken a haircut on any home yet, and we don't plan to here. This is actually about calling time on something that hasn't worked. It's about making sure that we can sell these properties, we can release that capital, and we can get it back into the Kiwi Build scheme.
But you admit that they could end up in the hands of speculators?
They could end up in the speculators. They're being put onto the open market. They have been offered to Kiwi Build buyers. These were not the right house in the right place. What we are saying, it is ridiculous for us to keep that capital tied up in these properties, that it is time for us to release that capital and put it into schemes that have worked. If we look at some of the recent Kiwi Build offerings, things like the Monarch Apartments in Wellington, like Northcote in Auckland, we've seen that those houses have been oversubscribed and there has been huge demand. I want to see us using that money to provide houses for Kiwi Build buyers.
What does this do to solve this? What does this do to solve the fundamental problem and difficulty around actually building houses at the moment?
Well, one of the things that we are very conscious of, that this is 2 years, nearly 2 years into a program. That what we do know is that the provision of the large numbers of house and the large-scale developments on Crown land are still down the pipeline. But I think if we kind of pause and take a step back and look, that in 2 years this government has delivered record numbers of state houses. We actually have people having bought and living in Kiwi Build houses. Put that in perspective. It took the first Labour government 2 years to get someone moving into the first state house. So actually, in our first 2 years, we actually have built a large number of houses. We will see the larger numbers come on stream when we can get into the large-scale developments.
How did you get to that 5% figure, and what assurances have you had from the banking community on that?
I've met with the banking community and I've had discussions around them about what some of the impediments for first home buyers and Kiwi Build buyers being able to take advantage of what was there in front of them. The level of deposit, we know that there are a large number of people out there that are essentially making mortgage payments in their rent, that it is a matter of getting that deposit together. It is absolutely feasible that someone can use a combination of putting together their KiwiSaver release, the grant they can get to get into home ownership, as well as a lower deposit, actually makes it much easier for people to transfer those rent payments into mortgage payments and to get into home ownership. And I think that is what generations of New Zealanders have been able to do, and we want to see another generation of New Zealanders do that. Sorry?
Which banks are on board?
We've met with all the banks.
And all on board?
They are all interested in working very closely with us around how it is that we can work more closely with Kiwi Build borrowers to show actually this isn't a complicated scheme. And there are really positive ways to get into home ownership. But yes, they are all on board around that.
Did Treasury raise any concerns about the level of exposure that that opens the government up to in terms of the housing market?
in terms of the 5% deposit.
95% instead of 90%.
No, we're not talking about huge numbers, and there wasn't concern raised about that.
How soon would a progressive home ownership scheme be actually in place?
So I'm looking to take the final design features of that to cabinet by the end of this year. We're looking to have that in place next year.
And your pre-budget briefings?
Through the progressive home ownership scheme. So we're looking over a 4-year period about being able to provide 2,500 to 4,000, and that depends on the final design options. It depends how far down the income continuum we want to go, because obviously as you get further and further into lower incomes, that you're putting more and more support around people. So they're final design options that we'll be able to update more on as we go through that design
Prime Minister
process.
Jacinda Ardern initially announced the reset in January. We're now sitting here in September. What took so long?
Oh, I think most good things take 9 months to gestate. So look, this has been work we've needed to go and do and look really carefully at and consider a range of options. We've been determined that we need to get this back on track, that Kiwi Build wasn't working in the way that we wanted it to, and we needed to find ways to make it work.
What did you add in as Minister that wasn't already part of the Kiwi Build reset that you inherited from Minister Twyford?
Look, there's been a range of things. Obviously, thinking had been going on before I became Minister. It was about pulling a lot of those things together and making sure that we had a clear pathway through to things like progressive home ownership, and that we were looking at what expanded cohorts of Kiwi Build buyers would be like. I was very interested in what we could do to make sure that we had more opportunities for second chance buyers, for example.
Sorry, had he scrapped 100,000? Had that already?
Oh, look, I think that discussions around the target had certainly been well underway. I think many of you in this room had been asking questions about that target for quite a period of time. That it was apparent to us that the target actually was starting to drive the policy. And I don't think that you can call a target a success when it is actually causing perverse outcomes in a policy.
So
in
the pre-budget briefing on housing, Treasury said Kiwi Build subsidies are an expensive intervention that benefits relatively well-off households and risks distracting from the deeper goal of reducing actual building costs. What are you doing today to address that? So
there's several important measures around that. There's obviously the RMA reform and the work that's going on with Kāinga Ora, with the Urban Development Authority, in terms of land supply, which is actually held up to be one of the important components of the cost of building a house in New Zealand. We've actively progressed the procurement around off-site manufacturing, so that we can look at economies of scale around how it is that we can build through a more manufactured process. I've also written a letter to the Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, the Honourable Chris Whāpoi, suggesting that we might like to use the market study powers in the building industry to have a look at what the costs there are.
And are you able to, what impact will the Urban Development authorities have on providing more land?
That will be around consenting and smoother pathways around consenting.
And when would you expect those to sort of cut in?
Well, that's something that I'm actively talking to Minister Twyford about. That's obviously something that sits within Minister Twyford's portfolio within urban development, but that is work that is progressing well.
How many houses is as many as we can?
It is as many as we can, as fast as we can. One of the things that we absolutely have to understand is Kiwi Build is a lever, not an outcome. So for the last few weeks, as I've been resetting this policy, I've been really mindful that I've been driving around Christchurch looking at billboards that are telling me that there are home and land packages for $460,000 being offered by the private sector. This is $40,000 under the Kiwi Build cap in Canterbury. Do we need to be pulling on the Kiwi Build lever as strongly when those are being offered by the private sector? No, we don't.
Labour promised young New Zealanders they would build them 100,000 homes though.
What Labour promised young New Zealanders is that we had a commitment to helping New Zealanders into homes. We are continuing that today. We are putting up $400 million for a progressive home ownership scheme, the likes of which we have never seen in New Zealand before, to help people into home ownership. We are continuing with a government build program with Kiwi Build to ensure that the affordable end of the market is being supplied, and we remained committed to this. What we are doing is returning to the historic commitment that governments have had with New Zealanders that they will be an active player in making sure there are expanded opportunities for home ownership in New Zealand.
So will it be thousands of Kiwi builds or tens of thousands of Kiwi builds?
It will be as many houses as we can, as quickly as we can.
So you'd be happy with 10,000 over 10 years?
It will be as many as we can, as quickly as we can.
How are the Greens feeling about today's announcement?
Oh, look, I want to say to those New Zealanders today who have given up hope on their dream of owning a home, that we've opened the door to you, that we know previous political decisions have locked you out, and today we are going to start to fix that. I am really pleased. This is an absolute delivery on our confidence and supply agreement. We came into government agreeing to a progressive home ownership scheme as part of Kiwi Build, and today we've absolutely announced and delivered that. This is $400 million to support more New Zealanders who otherwise wouldn't have a chance of owning their own home into home ownership.
And what would you ideally like to see that scheme look like?
We've both agreed that we want to pick up those who are currently able to pay their rent, but don't have enough left over because of high rents and low incomes to be able to save for a deposit. And they are on a stable income, but not a high income, a low and medium income. And we can help those people pay towards owning their own home rather than just paying off someone else's mortgage.
Will there be house price caps and income caps for the progressive house schemes?
Look, we've got to do the detailed design work on that, and we'll come back with that. But look, I mean, I would imagine it would fit within the framework of Kiwi Build, but we'll come back with detailed design work. We have to look at all those detailed questions as we go through.
If people don't pay their rent with the rent to buy scheme, would they then be ineligible to continue with the scheme?
Look, rent to buy is only one option within a progressive home ownership scheme. We haven't even settled on what that will be, so it's far too early to answer questions.
Actually get their policy.
Absolutely. That rent to buy is one part of progressive home ownership. Shared equity is another. And in fact, our confidence supply agreement talks explicitly about rent to buy being one option within the broader category of progressive home ownership. This is something that all three parties in our government are absolutely committed to.
Listen, this is a political highlight for me today. Our confidence and supply agreement was very clear to deliver progressive home ownership. We are going to put home ownership back within the realm of lower income people who, because of the way we have approached housing, particularly under the previous government, have been locked out of something that by right should be available to people who can pay their rent. I'm really pleased that $400 million, a major core part of the Kiwi Build reset, is being committed to helping more people to be able to afford their
$400 million?
Sorry?
$400 million for 4,000 families, that's a subsidy of around $100,000 per family. Is that a good return on investment?
So that is recyclable.
Yeah.
The way in which the Housing Foundation schemes and actually Habitat for Humanity, also the schemes that are happening out there in the community housing sector, they are recycled funds because, of course, that people pay back that equity over a period of time. So it's a loan.
Will there be any changes to the overall $2 billion Kiwi Build Fund?
No, that is $400 million that was ring-fenced in Budget 19.
Did you consider changing the price caps or income eligibility levels?
That we have actually made some changes around the price caps within this, that we have increased the price cap in Wellington, where it is about building 3-bedroom homes. That what we haven't been able to achieve in the Wellington region so far is actually 3-bedroom homes. So we want to make sure there's the flexibility to be able to do that. We've also given a delegation to the Minister of Finance and myself for developers to apply for 10% of homes to be over the price caps to get 4+ bedroom homes into a given development. But that's something we'll have to look at on a case-by-case basis. But we do realise that we do have to find a pathway for building more than 3-bedroom homes in some developments to meet the needs of large families.
Will you try to announce all the details of this progressive ownership scheme today, why do we need to wait for a few more months to get all the details?
No, we weren't trying to do it today, that we have started the discussions with the community housing sector that are currently in this space. And look, I make absolutely no apologies for taking the time to get this scheme right. This is $400 million that is being put into this scheme. It is a new area for the government to be working in, and we are going to make sure that we do that we get this right.
We continue to match Kiwiwood price caps. Sorry, we continue to match price caps for Kiwiwood houses and the Welcome Home Loan. So is the Wellington price cap for Welcome Home Loan going up?
We're looking at what greater alignment needs to come between those schemes.
And what is the new Wellington price cap? Sorry.
It's raising by $50,000.
So in line with Auckland and
Yes.
Queenstown.
Yes.
So when you look at those 4-bedroom houses, are you going to put a price cap on the 10% that are above?
Yeah, and that's why it's a delegated power to the Minister of Finance and I, that obviously that there will need to be a price cap that's put on that. It isn't spelt out. We'll need to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Could it be over $1 million?
Oh, no. This will be incremental. I mean, I can't say that you'd one more bedroom would cost $400,000. That would be inconceivable.
So no Kiwi builds over $1 million?
We aren't looking at doing Kiwi builds over $1 million, no.
By how much are you reducing the underwrite available to developers?
And again, that will be on a contract-by-contract basis. But this is one of the things when we really lifted the hood, that we needed to put enough tension in those contracts with developers, that the greatest return for a developer would be when they sold directly to a Kiwi build buyer. I'll just finish the answer to this question. So that there's three prices. There's a market price, there's a Kiwi build price, and then there's an underwrite price. Developers are going to want to be achieving their Kiwi build price, and they're incentivised to do that. And what we've seen in developments that have recently gone to the market, there has been no need to trigger the underwrite because they've been the right house in the right place, and there has been clear Kiwi build buyer market demand for those properties.
Can you give us a ballpark figure though?
That will depend on.
So like 20%?
That will depend on contract to contract, and it will work through. But what I can do is I can tell you it will not be 100% of the Kiwi build price. It will be less.
Are you concerned that they'll take away the incentive for developers to do Kiwi build?
No, what I'm more excited about is that it increases the incentive on Kiwi build developers to be building the right house in the right place and the underwrite not to be triggered, as we've seen with the Monarch Apartments in Wellington and as we've seen with Northcote in Auckland.
Taking away the asset test and putting in the ability for people buying studios to flip them within a year, are you making this policy completely waterable?
Not at all. Taking away the asset test for second chances is something that will open this opportunity up for more people. Bear in mind that the income cap still sits there. That you still need to be below the income caps to qualify. But look, there are real reasons why people may have more assets but not own a home at the moment. And I mean, the most common is a relationship breakup or family breakdown, where people essentially are starting again. And KiwiBuild offers an opportunity for them to shore up their future in home ownership again. Likewise, if you're a teacher and you're relocating from Invercargill or Ashburton to Auckland, but you've owned a home in one of those places, it's unlikely to be sufficient to get you into home ownership in Auckland if you haven't been in that house for a long time and built up a lot of equity. That we think there's really good opportunities for these people to be helped through this scheme as well.
What about flipping houses within a year?
Well, what we do know is that if you're a young couple that are buying a studio or a one-bedroom apartment, signing up for 3 years has been an impediment to buying a KiwiBuild property. You don't know if you're going to have children. You don't know if your career is going to take you somewhere else. That has stopped people from purchasing those studios and one-bedrooms. So a year seems about right. Bear in mind that actually the Welcome Home Loan is a 6 months requirement around occupation, that we are keeping that for a year. We think that seems to be about a fair and right balance.
But those people that stay in it for a year, aren't you just encouraging or breeding a whole new generation of speculators?
They need to live in that house themselves. Let's not get carried away with this. They need to live in that house for a year. What it is an opportunity for people to get into home ownership. And it is, studios and one-bedrooms are going to be seen by many people as a way onto a property ladder. And staying in them for 3 years has been the impediment to people buying them. Now they do. Studios and one-bedrooms offer an affordable first rung on a property ladder, so we want to make sure that those opportunities are there. They're an important part of expanding those opportunities for home ownership.
And as a second chancer, I could own 30 yachts and get a Kiwi build?
You'd need to be earning under the income cap as well, so bear that in mind. So your ability to own 30 yachts, but be earning under the Kiwi Build income cap would make you quite an exceptional human being.
Gina, if it's of interest, I was particularly pleased to see that part. I've been talking to, for example, a young now single mum in my local Manurewa community with children who has owned a home before but no longer does and really needs that security, especially in a relationship breakup. One thing she does need for her and her children is some sort of security that she can service a mortgage but just needs a hand. I'm really pleased to see some flexibility given there. Those people are actually in the same disadvantaged situation as many other first home buyers.
Did she have enough assets to be over the asset threshold?
Sorry.
Did this woman have enough assets to be over the
She was under the threshold, of course.
One of the things I think that the asset test for second chances, that it's been there in Kiwi Build, but actually the asset test has been one of the things that has actually made it seem really complicated to people. And one of the things that we're doing in terms of putting removing this is actually making this a much easier to communicate opportunity for people.
Did the developers take the government for a ride with some of those early developments that you are now having to sell yourself?
Oh, look, it is absolutely clear that some of the early deals were not the right house in the right place. That we do know that these are houses that will sell to a different cohort, and that is what we will be doing in these instances. We've learned a lot in the 2 years that we've been doing this, and today is actually about making sure that we're making changes based on those learnings. There's certainly not deals that we signed up early on, many of them we wouldn't sign up to today.
So was the government taking advantage of?
Look, we've learned a lot over that period of time. The most important thing is, and developers have learned a lot as well about how this is going to work, that we've made the necessary changes, that we're saying it hasn't worked in the way that we needed it to, and we're putting in place things to stop some of those earlier contracts being entered into again. Look, I've made my expectations really clear to officials around the fact that we need to be building the right house in the right place where there is clear and demonstrated market demand from the Kiwi Build cohort of buyers.
You scrapped the interim targets, now you've scrapped the overall targets. Looking back, do you think putting any targets at all was a mistake?
Yes, I think that it drove perverse outcomes in the policy, and that's why we're removing them today.
Perverse outcomes, wrong places, wrong price points. How much responsibility does Bill Twyford need to take for the failure of Kiwi Build?
Look, we've been really clear as a government. This has not worked in the way that we wanted it to. And as a government, we are taking responsibility for making sure that we're learning from that and that we're making the necessary changes.
Is that on him? Because you're now coming in saying, look, I've fixed it, and you're saying all of these things, all of these things that did happen under his watch.
Look, I don't think that's a particularly useful line of inquiry. I think the most important thing is that as a government, we have a commitment to not bloody-mindedly pursuing a policy because we said it a few years ago, but actually having the courage to call time on it, say it hasn't worked, and make the necessary changes. As a government, we have been committed to doing that, and that's what we're delivering on today.
But you're asking us today to judge you on the success of this.
Yeah, what we're saying is that we're not going to have targets that provide perverse outcomes and perverse behaviours. But what we are saying is that we will have be absolutely transparent on the way the scheme is operating. We will publish monthly data that shows you exactly what is happening within the scheme.
Looking back on some of those bad deals that haven't worked, was Bill Twyford naive to sign up to those?
Oh, we've all learnt a lot over that period of time. That I think the fact that we did have those targets, that the targets became all-consuming for everybody, the need to meet those targets, and that is why we're removing those targets today.
He always said that you needed balls of steel to pull off Kiwi Build.
Next question.
Can you provide some more detail around this moving between cities if you already own a house? Will there still be some kind of asset test on those, and will it only be to Auckland and Queenstown?
You can't own a house. so that you need to be in a position that you've sold it. Maybe you've sold up in Ashburton or Invercargill and you're moving to Auckland. You've only been in your house for a short period of time, but the equity that you have and that you've taken out, plus all your car and your furnishings and all those other things, might put you slightly over the asset test. But you're moving into an entirely different housing market. That you're very much in a situation of many first home buyers. You won't qualify, of course, for KiwiSaver release. You won't qualify for Home Start. You won't qualify for all those things necessarily if you've used them before. So you may not have got the maximum amount you could have out of the scheme initially. This is actually really important if we're going to make sure that we have enough teachers and nurses and police able to enter into home ownership in some of our biggest cities, which I think we'd all agree we want to see people in those critical workforces able to move to and make lives in.
There was Michael Thomas Kiwibirds almost all over the country. He talked about Kiwibirds in South Island and North Island. Looking forwards now, is it going to be mostly Kiwibirds in Auckland, Wellington, Queenstown, not really anywhere else?
Look, KiwiBuild will be where they are required, where the market is broken and isn't delivering houses at an affordable level. I think what we're seeing when I talk about KiwiBuild being a lever, if there is a demand from buyers, from KiwiBuild buyers, and there aren't houses at the price points that they can buy at, i.e. the KiwiBuild cap or below, then we can use KiwiBuild as a mechanism to deliver houses at that price point.
And what are those areas right now, in your view? What are those areas right now, having laid a look at it, where there is a need for intervention?
Look, I think it's really clear that there is obvious demand in Auckland, that we see Queenstown has that area, has that demand, and Wellington has that area, but there are some other areas too. Nelson is an area that has clear demand, Tauranga. But what we also cannot lose sight of is that there are other housing demands in other parts of the country. And this is where we do need to situate KiwiBuild within the broader housing policy of this government. In some parts of New Zealand, that demand is actually around public housing, and it's around temporary and emergency housing to address the real problem of homelessness that we have in this country. And that is why we will be taking very much a place-based approach. And we will be assessing what the right house and the right place is and building to that need.
So will you be more proactive in turning down developers who want to build KiwiBuild developments in parts of the country where there really isn't that demand? So maybe places like Taranaki?
We will certainly be proactive in turning down deals where there is not a clear market case that KiwiBuild buyers will purchase those homes.
With the Home Start grants, is there a maximum number now of how many people can contribute to buy a KiwiBuild house with those?
No. So what we're doing is opening that up. So it was 2. What we know is that there's many families that want to intergenerationally buy a home. We see that particularly within Māori and Pacifica families who really are shut out of home ownership, and this does offer a way for families to get into home ownership.
And do the same rules apply, so every single person that feeds in their Home Start grant has to live in the house?
Yes. So there will be rules of occupancy. So it will genuinely be multi-generational families that want to live together.
In terms of targets,
Unless you're going to live together.
In terms of the targets, with child poverty, the wound tenure, you put them in. With suicide, you don't want them. With KiwiBuild, you had them, now you don't have them. Is the government just picking and choosing targets to suit its narrative?
What we're doing is, when it comes to KiwiBuild, is saying that actually targets were part of the problem. That targets were driving perverse outcomes with this policy, and they are not what we need to be doing in order to deliver homes for New Zealanders.
So can you see from the public's perspective that they would think that this just looks like that when the going gets tough, you pull the target?
No, I think what the public will see is that when the going gets tough, the government has the courage to say this hasn't been working and that we need to make the necessary changes, because it is too important for us not to be addressing the issue of how we can get more New Zealanders into homes.
Is KiwiBuild still a 10-year policy?
KiwiBuild is still a 10-year policy.
The waitlist for state housing is at a sort of record high. Is the $2 billion that's being spent on KiwiBuild, could it be put to better use building more state houses?
Look, I think as a government, one of the things I am immensely proud of is the 2,200 state houses or public houses that we have built over the last year. I think if we put in perspective the last government's state house sell-off that saw them finish up government 1,500 fewer houses than they started with, and add to that the opportunity cost of the fact they did not add to the public housing stock over that period of time. If they'd, our target's 1,600 a year. If they'd managed 1,600 a year over 9 years, plus hadn't ended with the net 1,500 fewer than they started with, we'd have 14,000 more public houses in New Zealand. That is the entire waiting list taken care of. So we are working incredibly hard. We are building more state houses than we have in decades, and that is something that we will continue to prioritise.
But could the funds being put into Kiwi Build be put to better use on state houses? Would they help more people?
It's not either or. We're doing both. That we are building more state houses than any government has for decades. We have committed to that. We had a target of 1,600 this year. We have delivered 2,200 public housing places. That is something that we are immensely proud of and work that we will continue to do.
Can I just clarify the rent-to-own scheme? So if someone didn't pay their rent 1 week or 1 month or whatever, would they then be ineligible to continue with the...
That is, in terms of rent-to-own schemes and the detailed rules, we're not going to be commenting on them today. That we have to do the work around the progressive home ownership and exactly what models will be used. It is far. I mean, you can look at other rent-to-own schemes. Certainly, a big part of rent-to-own schemes actually is about working intensively with families around budget management, around getting them ready to pay a mortgage, and certainly there is an expectation that people pay their rent and a requirement that people pay their rent. But we're not going to get drawn into the details of a particular design because that work has not been completed yet.
Why is it just starting now?
It hasn't just started now. We've been throughout the reset. We've been actively talking to people in the sector and starting that work. But there is more work to be done on it. It is a big piece of work, and it's something that we absolutely have to get right. And that is something that I'll take to Cabinet before the end of the year.
Has Minister Twyford started work on that before?
There was a $400 million ring fence for progressive home ownership in budget 19.
When are you going to release those details? When are you going to?
I'll be taking that to Cabinet before the end of the year.
And so next year, election year?
Will be available next year.
Have you found a new head of Kiwi Build, and are you confident that they'll stay in the role for a longer period of time?
Well, of course, Kāinga Ora comes into place on the 1st of October. So Helen finished up her contract a few weeks earlier than the contract was for. So it was always going to be that would have to be that would have to be transferred into Kāinga Ora and in the structure in there. That's obviously an employment issue that I'm not involved in the employment of the person, but of course that's something that has been thought about for a longer period of time than before Helen handed in her notice, because she was only ever on a temporary contract.
When you opened up the bonnet, did you see that perhaps having the unit first at MB, then at this new ministry, then moving now to Kāinga Ora, was that one of the problems, that there was just so much confusion and moving around?
Look, I think that there have been some more fundamental problems. Obviously, the way in which it is administered is incredibly important, and certainly looking forward to having it a permanent home under Kāinga Ora and being able to get down to the work. But I think some of the fundamental problems that we've identified in terms of not building the right house in the right place was probably more of the problem.
Were you annoyed that the Greens let the cat out of the bag in terms of rent to buy?
I don't easily get annoyed, no.
We didn't let the cat out of the bag.
How will this help Māori whānau who live in generational rented properties?
You've heard that there is now the availability, the option for more than 2 people to be able to combine the $10,000 assistance. That will really suit multi-generation. I live in a multi-generational household. That will really suit nana, parents and children coming together. Also, because of previous political decisions, Māori are absolutely one of the lower home ownership rates that we are looking at. The progressive home ownership scheme will definitely help more Māori families who are currently, have given up on that hope to own a home, into being able to own their own home. So this is why I'm so pleased for this announcement today, to allow for more people, including Māori, to have that chance. We've seen the intergenerational benefits from when we have had deposit assistance schemes and home ownership assistance schemes before, and decades before. We've seen that have generational benefits with Māori whānau, and so I'm so pleased and look forward to this starting also for more Māori whānau.
And Minister Mahuta has been a really active participant in this reset, so been looking really closely at what we need to do in the area of Māori housing. And obviously Minister Mahuta has got a whole work program around that. Actually, interestingly enough, one of the areas that we do currently have some shared equity operated by government is there is a very small scheme that operates out of TPK. So certainly that's something that Nanaya and I will continue to talk about as well.
Also, Dave, and you've heard the Minister, and the Greens are definitely clear that we need to maintain our build and our focus for state and public housing. Again, many Māori are on the current waiting list, so again this will help more Māori into some secure, affordable housing as well.
Scrapping the promise to build 100,000 Kiwi builds, is that this government's biggest broken promise?
Sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Scrapping the promise to build 100,000 Kiwi builds, is that this government's biggest broken promise?
This government does not step away at all from its promise to New Zealanders that it is committed to helping New Zealanders into warm, safe and secure homes. We also are reconfirming a commitment of expanding the opportunities for home ownership for New Zealanders. And today we're committing $400 million. I think most New Zealanders will actually applaud us for reconfirming this commitment that we haven't seen in decades from a government that wants to be an active participant in housing and making sure we are addressing the housing crisis.
Did Labor get carried away with a slogan? I mean, it was 50,000 first and it was doubled to 100,000 for an announcement in 2012, and then it just kind of carried on as a useful opposition line, National aren't doing this, but we've got about 100,000 houses. Was it just one line that was really very forthright?
We know we have a shortage of housing in New Zealand. We will deliver those homes across a variety of mechanisms. The private sector will deliver some of them, but we are not going to sit back and just wait for the market to do it. That has not delivered for New Zealanders, and it's not what we're going to do. We know that we need to be an active participant to get people into home ownership, but we also know that we have to be building more public houses, that we need to be addressing homelessness, we need to be building temporary houses, that there is a requirement for at least 70,000 houses in this country, and we need to be part of it. That number didn't work in the way that we wanted it to, and that's why we're resetting it today.
Did you do enough work in opposition to kind of test that number then?
Look, we knew what the shortfall of housing was. That was the number that was put out there. What we've seen very glaringly when we've lifted the hood, that KiwiBuild is just one way in which we need to deliver those homes. There's a variety of ways in which we need to do it. That KiwiBuild sits inside a broader housing policy around addressing homelessness, around the provision of public housing, making sure that we're getting the settings right around the RMA and consenting within the Urban Development Authority to make sure that people can have the land required to build, that we're doing things like looking at off-site manufacturing. They're all issues that we need to set KiwiBuild within that context.
The Reserve Bank has been cutting interest rates, might cut them again. How concerned are you that that could reignite the housing market and make housing less affordable right across the board?
Well, one of the things that we have seen is an uptake in first home buyers entering the market, and I think that's something that actually I'm excited about. And that is only happening because we're also addressing the supply side, that we are actually seeing the provision of affordable houses that were lacking in the market before. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is an expansion of the market with more affordable stock coming on stream. That the fact that we're addressing both demand and supply at the same time means that you don't have that perfect storm of creating the kinds of bubbles that we saw over the last decade. That when you only address demand without addressing supply, that's when you get the problem.
Can I just get the process of how the Wanaka into Kaupata and Canterbury homes are now going to be sold on? is the underwrite triggered, the government steps up the money and then they put in the open market?
So some of those homes have had that underwrite triggered already. That's well known in terms of what that has been. All those homes will now just be offered on the open market rather than just to the Kiwi Build cohort of buyers.
And you said the 211, the future houses.
Yes, the future homes as well.
So you just ripping out the contract, or how does that work?
What we will say is that there is no longer a requirement that those homes only be delivered to Kiwi Build buyers, that they can be delivered on the open market.
Roughly how much money would that bring back in?
So in terms of the $114 million in Wanaka, 73 into Kaifata, and 20 million in Canterbury is the value of the underwrite in those areas.
And you could end up losing money on that?
Well, we haven't taken a haircut on any sales within Kiwi Build already, and certainly don't expect to here. If we look at, particularly at Wanaka, that actually there were the same houses were selling at the same price point that weren't badged as Kiwi Build were selling. They weren't selling to first home buyers, but there certainly was market demand for them. So I have absolutely no reason to expect that we will take a haircut on these either.
Were you concerned that taxpayers were previously too exposed with the level of underwrite, and that's why it's being reduced?
Look, let's be really clear that the underwrite means that we end up with houses that we can then take to the open market. These are not wasted houses. These are houses, actually we know they will sell because they have been selling in those locations, the same houses when a broader market was able to be entered. We're not going to end up with houses that can't be sold. We need to broaden the number of people that they can be sold to. And what I'm more concerned about is actually that we release our capital from those developments and get it working into developments where we are helping Kiwi Build buyers into first homes, like we've seen at the Monarch Apartments here in Wellington, like we've seen in Auckland.
How many homes are contracted to be built kind of going forwards right now? Is it about 14,000, or is that not all actually
they're in the pipeline, so committed, and in terms of the homes that are contracted and completed, that we have contracted moves from 1,993 to 1,546. Once we take out the houses that we will be selling on the open market, we're not going to continue to count those houses as Kiwi Build houses for obvious reasons. In terms of the committed forecast, that does not move, but the total committed and contracted moves from 10,356 to 9,909 with the changes.
Despite this reset, you're not getting out of any of those contracts?
What the 9,909 updated number has subtracted the houses in those three developments that we will be selling on the open market. It wouldn't be right to count those as Kiwi Build homes.
So collectively, that was a $200 million risk with houses that could end up in the hands of property speculators.
That is money that can be recycled through. I think it is always important to remember that. These are houses that will be sold. People will live in them. They are houses that will go some way to addressing the somewhere between 70 and 100 and something thousand shortfall of houses that we have in this country. That is important. What they haven't been able to be done is sold to Kiwi Build buyers. That money will be recycled back into the scheme, as always was the design of the scheme.
And if they can't sell on the open market, what happens?
We have no reason to believe that will be the case, that we've seen properties in these developments selling, just not to a Kiwi Build cohort of buyers.
Did Kiwi Build over-rely on buying houses off the plan?
The early developments, that was obviously the emphasis. That's where things went as we wait for the large-scale developments to come on stream. So that we did see that the target was driving to buying off the plans and going for quantity of houses rather than the right house in the right place. And that's what we're looking to reset today, and that's what we're changing. The large-scale developments will come on stream, but let's not forget that we were starting from square one. We were facing a decade, or more than a decade actually, of governments not being active participants in housing in New Zealand.
Given that the government's spent a lot of time focusing on what the government now admits is the wrong areas, how much of a rush is there now to, I guess, build in what you consider the right areas, especially coming up into an election year?
Oh, look, those developments, many of them are underway. We've seen that. I return again to Monarch and Northcote, that we've seen huge demand for the properties offered off the plans in those areas, that they are the right house in the right place. That we see that people are wanting to move into them. Will there be a rush to build houses where there is demand? I hope so. That's the purpose of the policy, that we do see the houses that Kiwi Build buyers want and have the ability to buy being built and people moving into them.
How many Kiwi Build homeowners will there be at the end of your first term?
Well, what we do know is that there have been 139 houses that have been sold. There are currently houses that have been completed. We know the number of houses that have been completed. I would hope those sales will occur.
Over 1,000?
We'll wait and see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Adelaide.
Off Adelaide Road. Yeah.
Here we're at.
They've sold off the plans.